welcome to Business Line. The so-called Panama Papers have dominated the news headlines over the past week, with new names and details emerging every day. Last week, when we looked at the sensational revelations from the biggest leak of files in history, we focused on the schemes and practices described in the Panama Papers. This time we look at the consequences. The Panama Papers have taken their toll on tax havens and those using them. The global offshore tax hunt is on, and many politicians have had to make official statements explaining why their names are mentioned or linked to the files. Among them, heads of states and governments. The Prime Minister of Iceland has been the first victim of the revelations.
Iceland's government has survived a no-confidence vote. It was put forward by the opposition after revelations from the leaked Panama Papers, which have already forced the Prime Minister to step down. The government has a majority and the vote was rejected. Another motion calling for the dissolution of Parliament was also defeated. But protesters who've been outside the Parliament building all week want to see the government resign.
There are still two ministers on the Icelandic government that are implicated. They are not supposed to be in a government. They are not supposed to be handling public money.
What really mostly makes me angry is how arrogant the Icelandic politicians are and how they talk down to the people of the Icelandic nation.
Links to offshore accounts are particularly sensitive in Iceland, where bankers use tax havens to hide their risky dealings before the banking crash of 2008.
Speaking of the Panama Papers, it's important to point out that not all the practices described in the leaked files are illegal. Over the last week, there have been two terms popping up all over the media. They are tax evasion and tax avoidance, and the key word is not tax. Tax evasion is an illegal practice to avoid paying real tax liability. It could be used by individuals, companies, or organizations. Usually those caught in this practice are subject to criminal proceedings. Tax avoidance, on the other hand, is entirely legal. Moreover, all people have the right to reduce the amount of taxes they pay as long as it's done by legal means. So basically, there is nothing wrong in tax deductions and credits that help you to minimize your tax bill. And that is something your accountant could easily advise on as long as the legal line is not crossed. So, as I said, it's perfectly clear when it comes to the legal issues. But it's the morality that muddies the waters. And it all just hooks up when it comes to decision makers and high-profile politicians. In an attempt to close down the controversy about his family involvement in offshore practices, David Cameron decided to publish information from his tax returns of recent years. By taking this unprecedented step, the British Prime Minister triggered a series of personal disclosures from his finance minister and opposition leaders.
Politicians in Britain are rushing to publish their tax returns in a bid for transparency amid the fallout from the Panama Papers. David Cameron made history on Sunday, becoming the first British leader to reveal the details of his income. After it was revealed he'd owned a stake in his late father's offshore fund. Defending his financial affairs, he said wealth and aspiration are not dirty words, and announced new measures to rein in tax avoidance, particularly in British dependencies considered tax havens.
For the first time, UK police and law enforcement will be able to see exactly who really owns and controls every company incorporated in these territories. Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands, Bermuda, Isle of Man, Jersey, the lot.
The opposition questioned the morality of offshore investments.
There is now one rule for the super rich and another for the rest. I'm honestly not sure, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister fully appreciates the anger that is out there over this injustice. The truth is that the UK is at the heart of the global tax avoidance industry. It's a national scandal and it's got to end.
The Prime Minister's approval rating dropped below Jeremy Corbyn's for the first time over the weekend, with 58% of people surveyed casting doubt over Cameron's ability to run the country.
Apart from putting pressure on politicians, the Panama Papers could also reignite global efforts in fighting illegal practices and closing tax loopholes. And that could take it all to a whole different level. The challenge, though, is for all to reach a compromise. If not, the efforts of some countries would make no sense without other nations' participation. The German finance minister, the person in charge with the Eurozone's largest economy, has presented his plan, pointing out at the importance of cooperation.
German Finance Minister Wolfgang Schäuble has waded into the Panama Papers controversy by suggesting that offshore registers should be created that name company owners, which are then shared internationally. He also suggested that the timescale of the statute of limitations should be changed. We have to internationally standardise registers and information, and then link the registers internationally and automatically exchange information. We can then significantly reduce the leeway for such excessive abuse models. A lot has happened already, but this will be stepped up now. New Zealand has announced a review of its foreign trust laws after its legal framework has been shown to be vulnerable to international tax avoidance. Former PricewaterhouseCoopers chair John Shewan is to lead the review and report back by June the 30th.
We're open to considering changes to disclosure rules if that is warranted, so we've asked Mr Shewan to take a thorough, independent look at the current regime to check it's fit for purpose.
The review is to focus on disclosure rules for foreign trusts.
The European Commission has been working on another draft targeting big multinational corporations. It's been a while since the lawmakers in Brussels have attempted to tackle this issue, and the Panama Papers scandal could help speed the process up.
EU regulators want major multinationals to be more transparent in their tax dealings. Their proposal aims to stop companies from shifting their profits around Europe to lower their tax bills. It calls for firms to publicly say how much they pay and where, including any activities in tax havens.
If large multinationals active in Europe are paying tax in somewhere like Panama, to take one example, they'd need to make that public.
The European Commission's plan will need the backing of EU governments and MEPs to become law. It will apply to all firms with more than €750 million in revenues.
It's a minimal, very minimal step in the right direction, but it also shows the total lack of courage of the European Commission and the total lack of responsibility of the Member States.
A study conducted for the European Parliament in 2015 estimated corporate tax avoidance costs the bloc as much as €70 billion a year.
That was it for now. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.